I've never done this before. I mean, I've given shiurim before many times. I've never spent one night a week for a month contemplating what the calendar, what the master of the universe through the agency of time is demanding of us with such focus. And so the past number of weeks, we've been, in one way or another, attempting to weave together the different elements of where we find ourselves, both in world history, in terms of this current kufa that we find ourselves in terms of where we find ourselves in the calendar, the Parsha Shavua, the different elements to try to weave together in order to arrive at some space of thinking about what does the hour demand of us at this moment. And seeing as this is the last week that we will be focusing on Cheshvan, so we'll say goodbye to Cheshvan. We'll wrap up this inyan. We've touched on a number of different nekudos. Just to review quickly, we spoke about the inyan of Cheshvan as whispering the first week. That after the Yomim Tovim of Tishrei, where there's a lot of noise and a lot of communal action, in Cheshvan things quiet down quite a bit, which led us to, in the second week, speak a little bit about being an individual, being able to swim against the stream and to find your own voice, even if society does not necessarily hear the same thing that you're hearing, which led us to speak about copying oneself, that Avram Avinu is Avram above and Avram below, that in the month of Cheshvan, which is that focus on the individual, it's an opportunity to recognize that the only person we should be copying if we don't want to get slapped by the Reb's father, as we said that anecdote by Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. If we want to copy anybody, the only person that we should be copying is our upper version of ourself, and how only a minor piece of our own conscious awareness of what we call Anochi, what we call our own Ani, is actually a representation of a deeper and much more profound version of ourself, which constantly we are attempting to bring into from a place of not subconscious, but super consciousness down into our life. And then finally this week, Emir Tashem, what we'll speak about is the inyan of Cheshvan as it relates to the opportunity that we have. I think it comes somewhat full circle. Now it's sofa b'tchilaso on a certain level, that the whispering of Cheshvan, the fact that we don't have any holidays in Cheshvan, which we focused more on the ability to internalize, to kind of take that from a different angle, a little bit of a different angle. Obviously, many, the Rishonim already are grappling with this issue, but many of the Sfarim are grappling with the issue that our Parsha, Chaya Sara, is called Chaya Sara only to immediately speak of Sarah's death. That it's somewhat ironic, somewhat unusual that the Parsha, which is called the life of Sarah, immediately channels her demise. And that's obviously somewhat ironic. And so what I wanted to speak about, just to jump right in without any, building any tension or suspense here, is the somewhat obvious nakuda, but to really work on this through some actual text here, to work on the idea a little bit that in order to really acquire something, in order to really appreciate life, to really appreciate Chaya Sara, there needs to be an encounter with death. That in order to appreciate anything, the old, almost cliche that you don't really appreciate something until you've lost it, is Chaya Sara, the Chaya Sara, the Parsha of Chaya Sara that speaks about the life of Sarah, and the fact that Avram Avinu is able to give us this glimpse into, prophetically, we have a tradition that Eshes Chayil was originally recited by Avram Avinu as a hesped for Sarah, and that on a certain level there were elements of Sarah Imeinu's simplicity, simple, like 7, 20, 100, her simplicity and her purity and her beauty that Avram Avinu did not and could not possibly recognize until until after she was gone. And on a certain level, the avoda of Mar Cheshvan, is really, it's a quote from the Rishner, of Yisrael of Rishon, is cited in a number of Svarim, the Bnei Yissaschar being just one of them, but his grandson, the Chaya Sara, who added to his grandfather's work. So in the Sefer Chaya Sara, he quotes from the Rishner that the lashon of Mar Cheshvan, of course, is a lashon of, in the context of talking about why it is that a person is not permitted to daven, Gemara in Brachos, that a person is not permitted to daven within Arba Amos of some somewhat questionable material, whether it be tzoa or meraglayim or other things which are going to be distracting and or abominable to the tefillah experience. So the Gemara says there that the reason you need Dalet Amos is this lashon of rachushe merachshin sfasayim, that when a person finishes davening, after a person completes the tefillah, there tends to be a continuation. A person is mumbling the words as they continue on. And at a certain level, the Rishner said that the reason Mar Cheshvan is called Mar Cheshvan is a lashon of merachshin sfasayim, that the lips are still moving from after all of the tefillos that we said during the Yom Noraim. But on a deeper level, and we definitely spoke about this a little bit the first week that we spoke about Cheshvan, that Torah that we read from Shir Hashirim, that Mayafu Pamayach Ben Alayim Bas Nediv, how beautiful are the footsteps from Rav Schwab of the Bas Nediv when they're in their shoes, and we said that must be when they're coming back from Aliyah L'Regel, because when you do Aliyah L'Regel, you're not allowed to wear your shoes going up. And when the Gemara in Chagiga says this is talking about the Jews going Aliyah L'Regel, obviously it's talking about when they're coming back and they're really receiving. In order to really appreciate what it is that we received from the Yom Noraim, it's not just that we continue to have our lips move, but on a certain level, when you're in the heat of the moment, davening by the Yom Noraim, and when you're in the heat of the moment of being married to Sarah Imeinu, or in the heat of the moment of, being just to make this much more, grounded and mundane on a certain level, but also so much more relevant, when you're in the heat of the moment of being a parent, or being a husband, or being an Eved Hashem, and you're just in the moment of what does Hashem want from me from this moment, you're so focused on being careful with all of the black fire that we spoke about, and Baruch Hashem, that we're so careful with every detail of the halacha that we sometimes seem to miss the experience. We're so caught up being in the experience and making sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's and making sure that everything is taken care of, that it's only after the experience ceases to exist that we're able to take a step back and appreciate what it really is. And so Chaya Sara, of course, the life of Sarah can only possibly be properly appreciated after Sarah Imeinu passes away. Rav Soloveitchik described this so beautifully, and after this we'll get into some, this is all B'derech introduction. Rav Soloveitchik has an address from Yom HaZikaron, which is printed in Rabbi Rakefet's remarkable 2-volume work, The Rav, which is a semi-autobiographical work in the sense that he just quotes the Rav in places where he's referencing his life throughout his entire corpus of lecturing and shiurim. And so on page 201, I believe in the first volume, on page 201, he has a piece here that, again, titled by Rabbi Rakefet as Appreciating Parents. And I'm not going to read the entire passage here. It's about a page and a half, but I will read one paragraph here, because I think it really speaks to this same notion that sometimes you can't really appreciate something when it's too much in front of your face. You need to take a step back in order to properly appreciate it. It's also healthy to hear this for ourselves, and also for those of us who are dealing with small children who are, coming into themselves and at whatever age they are. I think most of us are in that stage one way or another. In my youth, I occasionally harbored critical feelings against my father, and even against my grandfather, meaning Rav Chaim. Most everyone has at some time gone through this rebellious state against parental authority. Sometimes the obstinate son asks whether he must always mold his life in accordance with the halacha, which appears to him pedantic and insensitive. Should not Judaism place more emphasis on compassion and mercy? Why not stress refinement and aesthetic values? Can the Shabbos only be observed under the exacting demands of halacha as expressed in the various chapters of the Talmudic tractate of Shabbos? We must wander through many foreign lands and experience numerous alien cultures. We must meet the greats of these nations and their intellectual and cultural giants. Only then will we revise our approach to our own forebears. We must observe the lifestyles of leaders in secular culture in order to truly appreciate the greatness of halachic masters and the glory of our ancestral tradition. A student of Rav Chaim, who later left Brisk and entered into an entirely different world, where he became a famous mathematician, related, "Years ago, I criticized many of Rav Chaim's views. Since then, I have spent many years under foreign skies and have met many people, among them unique and good individuals. I came to know intimately two of the most famous scientists who were also renowned for their upright ethical deportment. Only now do I fully comprehend the moral greatness of Rav Chaim. What he had in his thumb, they do not possess in their entire far-embracing hearts." In the next piece, he quotes the same person, but he quotes him by name. Rav Chaim had a student who became a leading professor of physics and mathematics. His name was Rav Yaakov Gromer. He was friendly with Albert Einstein, the physicist originator of the theory of relativity. He became irreligious and lived in Berlin. The Rav would visit him and on occasion observe him studying Talmud. Gromer would say, "I cannot tear myself away from the study of Talmud." Einstein was known as an ethical person, and once the Rav asked Gromer who was more ethical, Rav Chaim or Einstein. Gromer replied that Einstein was ethical, but that comparing him with Rav Chaim was like comparing a dwarf to a giant. The Rav said about himself that so long as he lived under his father and grandfather's roof and in their shadow, it was impossible for him to appreciate their genius. I mean, that was easy to appreciate, even if you were in front of them. Maybe the towering genius of them was what obscured other aspects of their personality. But he said that after he left Rav Chaim, after he was no longer under that house of his father's careful watch, he suddenly realized that these things that he took for granted as being normal were, people used to leave babies on Rav Chaim's doorstep, and he would take them in and basically raise them. Rav Chaim his chesed was so out of this world that, it's remarkable that we think of him as this towering intellect when there were aspects of his chesed that were just unparalleled. And so it takes a certain amount of time before a child leaves their parents' house, before we leave something until we can possibly appreciate it. And so I thought this was an appropriate juncture as we're leaving Cheshvan to take a moment to appreciate this remarkable month that we're in right now, which is basically a month of appreciating that Tishrei is gone. So somewhat meta exercise in taking leave of the month, which is all about taking leave, and attempting to connect to that on a certain level. That's the avoda of Chaya Sara. There's a Torah from Rabbi Nachman that is very dear to my heart, and I think explains this idea in a way which is rather profound and is based in classical sources. The Gemara in Beitza on Daf Tezayin has the sugya of Neshama Yisera. The Gemara quotes from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to reveal. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, he quotes a few psukim, makes a drasha that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the Jewish people that Matana Tova yesh li bebeis Gnaza, I have a Matana Tova in my otzer, in my beis ginzi, in my otzer, and Shabbos Shema, and I want you to go tell the Jewish people about it. And the Gemara has this whole discussion, which we've actually discussed together as a chabur before, that the Gemara says, when do you have to tell somebody you're giving them a gift? When do you not have to tell them you're giving a gift? The whole discussion in halacha, or the proper ethics of gift giving and gift receiving. And the Gemara there says that the Neshama Yisera is something that we would have received and not known about had not Moshe Rabbeinu told us about it. And so the Gemara says, and how do we know about this Neshama Yisera? What's the source that we even have a Neshama Yisera? So the Gemara says from Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Neshama Yisera nosin HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'adam erev Shabbos. The Neshama Yisera is given to a human being by HaKadosh Baruch Hu on erev Shabbos, on Friday. And on Motzei Shabbos, the Neshama Yisera is removed, is stripped from the person. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Shabbat vaynafash, Shabbos vaynafash, which refers to the resting of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end of the 7 days of creation, the 6 days of creation. The Gemara darshans Shabbos vaynafash, Kevan shashavas vay avda nafash. Once this day, which is referred to Shabbos, is Shavas, once there's a cessation of the day of Shabbos, Vay of the Nafash. Vay Nafash is a contraction of the words Vay of the Nafash. Woe unto the loss of this special additional soul that we're given on Shabbos. And so, Rabbi Nachman, in a landmark essay in Likutei Maharan, 272, Reish Ayin Beis. Rabbi Nachman writes in Reish Ayin Beis, in Likutei Maharan, he begins by citing a passage from the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar says, oh, not Reish Ayin Beis, excuse me. Reish Ayin Beis is a different Torah that I was looking at today. Samach maybe? The So Rabbi Nachman begins by citing a passage from the Zohar HaKadosh that says that every time Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was sitting together with the Chavraya Kadisha, he was sitting together with his holy friends, and he wanted to reveal a secret. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Zohar reveals secrets. That's what he does in the Zohar. And every time Rabbi Shimon wanted to reveal a secret, so the Talmidim would do something very strange. He would reveal some Torah thought, and the Talmidim would say, woe unto the generation that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is going to die in their generation. Meaning Rabbi Shimon was sitting right in front of them, and he would, give the shiur. And at the end of the shiur, the Talmidim would say, woe unto the generation that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is going to die in their generation. Which on the one hand is a very nice thing to say, I suppose, but it's also a super awkward thing to say. I mean, like, we are the generation that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is going to die in our generation, and talk about Maskirin Lo Yom HaMisa, that's a lot. But what's remarkable is that the Zohar says that every time we find this a number of times in the Zohar, that every time this would happen, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would then reveal a whole nother shlav, a whole nother interpretation of that same teaching, and would deepen the understanding of the teaching even more. And so Rabbi Nachman says, what is going on? Vailo Sador, and then the Zohar doesn't make the jump to say because of that, Rabbi Nachman makes this jump. And Rabbi Nachman quotes the Gemara in Beitza, and he says, what's the pshat that we learn about the fact that we have a neshama yisera from vaynafash? Bona gir, you want to say vaynafash is a contraction of the words vay of the, it's a strange drasha, but vay of the nafash. Woe unto us, we're going to lose our soul. That's how you learn you're going to have a neshama yisera, from the fact that we lose it on Motzei Shabbos? Quote me a pasuk that tells me that I have the neshama yisera on Erev Shabbos. Why are you teaching me about the fact that I have a neshama yisera from the fact that I lose it on Motzei Shabbos? So Rabbi Nachman says, I think you already see where we're going with this based on what we said before. Rabbi Nachman says, if a person truly wants to have access to the neshama yisera on Shabbos, then there's a trick that we have, that we're given. And that is that if you want to appreciate something before you lose it, if you would like to get the full value of something before it leaves, then you can meditate for a moment, you can express verbally the fact that something is ephemeral, something is temporary, that something is not going to last forever. That a child who is in their parents' home, or a parent who is in their child's home and is attempting to appreciate the fact that right now you have the ability to, right now, just this evening, I was able to sit and put my son on my lap. And in 10, 12 years from now, I am not going to be able to do that. Some of you are already there. And so to appreciate the fact that I'm able to do that now, to appreciate the fact that I'm going to put on tefillin in the morning tomorrow, I also need to appreciate the fact that I'm not going to be able to wear them in the afternoon because we're not on the level where we can wear tefillin all day. In order to appreciate Hanukkah before Hanukkah even comes, not after it happened and we lose it, it's to appreciate Hanukkah is going to come and Hanukkah is going to go. There is Hanukkah and then there's not going to be Hanukkah. And kind of leaning into that anxiety of things not being forever, leaning into the death anxiety, on whatever level we're approaching that, whether it's on the level of experiencing a Shabbos and having the opportunity that we're holding by Erev Shabbos already, and to be able to, from Erev Shabbos already, when the Neshama Yisera is coming in, Vayav the Nafesh, I'm not going to have this forever. And knowing that I'm not going to have that forever allows me to take the most out of it. And so every time the Talmidim would see that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was such an unbelievable force in their life, that he was able to reveal these niglos and nistaros of Torah, in that moment, they took to verbally expressing the fact that there was something that they had in this moment that they were not going to be able to have soon after that. And in doing so, were able to elicit from Rabbi Shimon a deeper appreciation of what it is that they had just heard, so that whether he actually expressed this newer idea, or they were then able to attribute to Rabbi Shimon this newer and more profound understanding of what Rabbi Shimon had said, it came from an appreciation of the fact that they were one day going to lose that thing. And so, Chaya Sara, it's the same, I was thinking just before, as I was grabbing this farm on the way out the door, I was thinking about the fact that it's a remarkable thing that we acquire Eretz Yisrael by buying a burial plot. We acquire the land of Israel, our hold on the land of Israel. The first real acquisition of Avram Avinu, Kesef Male, is a burial plot. And many drushas, including all the morbid jokes about death and marriage, kicha mistei Ephron, the marriage that a person affects together with their wife, and all those ridiculous and silly jokes, which are sad that people feel they need to make such jokes. But the fact that we learn out on a certain level, Kedusha Kesef, from kicha mistei Ephron, we learn out the possibility of creating Kedushin, of creating a link, an eternal link, which, as reflected in the Ksuba, is Ba'alma Hadein or Ba'alma Dase. It's in this world and it's beyond this world as well. That link which we create in this world via Kedushin is Dafka learned out from Avram burying Sarah. As if to say that on a certain level, to appreciate the acquisition of land in Eretz Yisrael, to appreciate Lahavdil, or not Lahavdil, it's called Morasha. Al Tikra Morasha ala Ma'orta, Morasa. That the land of Eretz Yisrael is also a certain level of Kiddushin. That the relationship that we have with Eretz Yisrael, or the relationship that we have with our spouses, is contingent on a certain level, that we break a glass by the wedding, not only to mourn over Yerushalayim, but as the Gemara in Bracha says very clearly, to mourn the fact that one day this beautiful thing that's happening is going to come to an end, and only then can you actually affect the Kiddushin. It's this remarkable, very ironic kind of entrance into marriage via the recognition that this is a limited proposition that is only going to last for as long as both of us are alive, or until this dissolves in some other way. Isha niknes b'shlosha dvarim drachim, and she's yatsa b'shtei dvarim. There could be two different ways of doing it, but until this thing is over, which recognizing the fact that this can be over, and even in the first Mishnah, right? The first Mishnah, that's shlosha drachim, that a woman could be married, and in that same Mishnah, it talks about the two ways that she can be yatsa. Because in order to properly appreciate the achnasa into this relationship, there needs to be the possibility or an encounter with, an admission of the fact that this could possibly and will eventually, ultimately, end, at least in the way that it's experienced in this world. And so this, on a certain level, is the avoda of the entire month of Cheshvan, that merachshin sfasayim, that our lips are truly moving only after our lips stop moving. After all the tefillos of Tishrei have ended is when we can begin to appreciate the avoda that we had in Tishrei. So as we're beginning to take leave, we can vie, woe into the generation, woe into the month that is going to pass, and we're not going to have a Cheshvan anymore where we can speak about this inyan, which is so important. Rav Hutner and the Pachad Yitzchak in letter Kuf Nun Hey, the Igros Uksavim of Rav Hutner are a gold mine of hadracha and eitzah and wit and a lot of other things as well. So Rav Hutner in letter Kuf Chaf Hey is writing to a Talmud. It's actually a pretty famous letter. It's a pretty famous letter. He's writing to a student who had spent some time in Mistama in Chaim Berlin, probably not in his kollel, Goraye, probably in Chaim Berlin, just based on the nature of the letter and the date. And I'll read it inside because the lashon is just so beautiful. So he says, Betach kibalta hamavrek. You certainly received the telegram, which I sent you. And I want you to know, b'shekvar hayamim hayam morgla b'pumya lahoros be'etzba al pasuk echad b'tehillim. I want you to know it's been a long time that I've been pointing to this pasuk in Tehillim and not fully understanding what it means. And this has been something which has been frequent in my mouth. Generally speaking, if two people want to speak to each other, if two people would like to speak to each other, so if you have something to say to somebody, you say, come over here, I want to tell you something. That's the way people speak. Amnam David HaMelech, but David HaMelech in Tehillim, noig b'zeh hanhaga hafucha. But David HaMelech, very strangely in Sefer Tehillim, does something quite the opposite. Sharehu Omer, because there's a pasuk in Tehillim, where the pasuk says, Lechu banim shimuli. Go, my sons, listen to me. Lechu banim shimuli. David HaMelech is giving eitzah to his children, and in the preface to his eitzah, which he wants to give them, he says, Lechu banim shimuli. Go, my sons, listen to me. Yotze midvarim eila shebishasha adibur hu mechuvan el abanim, yeshna hechitimtza kazu shedafka halicha merchakim malida es hashmiya. So Hutner says, we learn from this pasuk that apparently there is such a reality where sometimes a person needs to take a little bit of a step back, needs to have some distance in order to properly hear something, like we just learned, like we just read from Rav Soloveitchik. Kilomar, that is to say, Hanishma mikarov einu miskabel. Sometimes that which we hear from up close, we're not ready or we're not able to be makabel. But then, after you take a few steps back, you all of a sudden have a retroactive chalos of the shmiya that you heard before. And now Rav Hutner gets personal. He says to this Talmud, he says to this student, V'inei kama pa'amim yashavta samach elai. V'ani ha'isi medaber. And I recall many times you were sitting next to me in yeshiva, either physically next to me or pretty close to me, or you were sitting in the room when I was giving a shmooze or I was giving a shiur. And he doesn't quite use the terminology out to lunch, but he says like, you know, I spoke to you with all different types. I tried to access all different points of, you know, all different registers to try to talk to you. Gam hischananti, gam hisraamti, gam piasti, v'gam ha'alavt. I did everything. I implored, I complained, I tried to play nice, good cop, bad cop, I tried everything. But I insulted you even. Dibarti diburim shel eskarvus v'diburim shel harchaka. I spoke to you in words where I tried to draw you close, and I spoke words where I tried to push you away. V'chol zeh hayanira kizorik tzorli. the Kizork Tzurli. It's like throwing a stone into an empty well. You would open your eyes and stare at me like I didn't say anything to you. Kilomar daber el akota, like I was talking to a wall. And now all of a sudden, Ira hafla, pella. Miniskaimu dvarav shel David HaMelech. The words of David HaMelech have come true. L'chu banim shimuli. You left yeshiva, and now I'm getting these letters from you, and you're saying, "Oh, Rebbe, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm appreciating everything that you were saying to me." Halachta, you left. L'chu, halachta. Upitom niftechu aznecha l'mafreya. Your ears have opened up l'mafreya. Hoy l'chu banim shimuli. V'zu hi ha'she'ela shani ma'amid l'fanecha. So this is the question that I have for you, my dear Talmud. Hashivani davar. Please answer me one question. I have one thing. Please answer me. In be'emes hasiba shel tochin michtavcha. Can it be that the explanation for your heartening letter that you sent to me that shows that you've had this remarkable transformation, umitzara pasuk shel David HaMelech? Is it because of this verse of David HaMelech? Is that the explanation? Bitzipia laharamas karnam shel amali Torah Yitzchak. With great hope for the transcendence, for the elevation of those who toil in Torah, your Rebbe Yitzchak Kunner. This mahalach of being able to take a little bit of distance, to say goodbye to somebody, and in doing so to be able to truly acquire their presence. This month, just this month alone, and the past few months, so many remarkable and amazing, certainly within this chabura, and people who, I don't know if anyone ever met Rabbi Sachs. I met him a few times, and David Feinstein, and others. It was the yurtzeit of the Har Nof massacre just today, which was not that long ago. Kalman Levine and Moshe Tversky and others. Steinsaltz. I mean, when a person takes a step back and recognizes what transpires after the person is no longer there, all of a sudden, there's a cynical statement that people say. Hopefully not often, but there's a cynical. It's a Yiddishism. So the three parshos that go together. Achrei mos kedoshim emor. Achrei mos kedoshim emor. Those are the three parshas in a row at the end of Sefer Vayikra. So there's a quip amongst our people. Achrei mos, after somebody dies, kedoshim emor. Then everyone sees so holy. Kedoshim emor. They say, kedoshim. They're so holy. After everyone dies, all of a sudden, people become very holy. But the truth is that it's not such a cynical thing, because, on a certain level, Chaya Sara. Even in the Shach, you look in the poskim in Hilchos Avelos. So if you look in the poskim in Hilchos Avelos, there's it's on the books. There's a din. The Ramah writes that in the laws of Hesped in Yeridea, so in the laws of Hesped, there's an isser of exaggerating. It's not good for you. It's not good for the listeners. It's not good for the mace even, to exaggerate the accomplishments of the mace. But the Ramah writes, but to exaggerate a little bit is okay. Kach shteit in the Ramah. To exaggerate a little bit is okay. That's on the books in Hilchos Avelos. And over there, the Nosei Kalim are busy with like Mali Sheker Porta, Mali Sheker Tuva, What's the difference between a little bit of Sheker and a lot of bit of Sheker? Like, why are you allowed to exaggerate? And there are different answers to this question. One answer to this question is, well, everybody does a little bit more than what you see. Everyone has a hidden world. Going back to the first shiur, everyone has a hidden world of things that aren't seen, that aren't available for the community to see. All the matan b'seiser and all the avodah b'seiser. So you can exaggerate a little bit, but on a certain level, it's also that the exaggeration a little bit, which happens at the end after the person is gone, is obvious, because in the moment when a person ceases to have the thing that they had before, there's an appreciation that I lost this thing. So I just want to maybe move towards a closing. Share a Torah from a teaching from my older brother, Rav Weinberg, that I heard from him many years ago. A beautiful limud zchus of Klal Yisrael, and then something very practical in avoda from the Piazetzner, as we've been learning the Piazetzner during Chodesh Cheshvan. So we will we'll close out. We'll give the Rebbe his final words. The Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Kufta Zayin discusses what seems to be not such a nice presentation of Am Yisrael's departure from Har Sinai. Quotes the pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar, Vayis'u mehar Hashem, during Matos Maseh, where it's talking about all the different travels of the Jewish people, Vayis'u mehar Hashem. So the Gemara there cites a teaching that Vayis'u mehar Hashem has a double interpretation. They traveled away from the Har Hashem, from the mountain of Hashem. But there's also this connotation, Amr of Chama bar Chanina, Shesaru me'achrei Hashem. Vayis'u mehar Hashem, they left the mountain of Hashem, also implies they left Maher Hashem, they left Hashem quickly, they left Vayisur, they left Hashem. Shesuru me'achrei Hashem. As if to say, Rashi explains that they left Har Sinai a little bit too quickly. Tosfos quotes the Medrash, Divrei Maskil Peronios. So Tosfos quotes the Medrash, Vayisu shenasu mehar Sinai derech shloshes yamim ketino kayotz mibeis hasefer sheboreach mibeis hasefer. The tinok leaves the beis hasefer, runs out of the beis hasefer. Sheboreach lo v'holech lo. Kachayu borchin mehar Sinai. So the Mefarshim explain that they left Har Sinai just a little bit too. Vayisu mehar Hashem, maher Hashem. They left a little bit too quickly, like a child running away from school. The Mefarshim explain that Am Yisrael was slightly, this is the simple interpretation, Am Yisrael was a little nervous that, they just heard quite a sheet of rap sheet of things that they were going to be held responsible for and things that they were already doing wrong that they needed to then rectify. It was a lot to receive at once, and they were like, well, let's get out of here before, it's like the child's running away from school. It's like a child running away from school. Like the teacher gives a homework, like, let's get out of here before we get before we run into somebody who's going to give me more to do. And so that's a simple interpretation of the Gemara. My brother, Moshe Tzvi, once suggested that a limud zchus for Am Yisrael could be to see it in this light. That the running away that is taking place, and maybe the child doesn't even realize why they're running away. But I could speak from personal experience, and I think these Makoros speak to the idea as well, and I'm sure you can join me in this experience, that there's something about when you're finished with school and you're finished with the formalized education process, running away from it is actually the greatest act of running towards it. And that Am Yisrael running away from Har Sinai was not only, it was also the fear of being given more things to do. But on a certain level, it was also running away from Har Sinai so that they could actually encounter it for the first time for real. Not only in the academic sense, or not only in the sense of it being taught to them, but to actually live it in a way where by leaving Har Sinai, they would finally be able to experience Har Sinai. And so if Rabbi Nachman gave us the Eitzah, that if we want to, in earnest, really appreciate an opportunity while we have it, we need to embrace the fact that we're going to lose it. So there's a piece in Tzav V'Ziros, which we've been learning over the past few weeks, which I think borrows from this Eitzah in a very practical way, which again is a little different than what we've been talking about, but you'll see obviously why this ties in. And so we'll end with a practical piece of advice that I think we could take forward, because Lamaisa, it's nice to be able to appreciate this as a philosophical idea, but something practically that we can that we can all benefit from going forward and take with us past Mar Cheshvan. So this is from Tzav V'Zira's Os Gimel. Im margish ata shalibcha bekirbcha nishbar. If you ever experience, as we all do from time to time, if a person ever experiences a deeply unsettling emotional encounter with their own broken heart, a sense that I'm not doing enough, or I just did something I shouldn't have done, or in any of these, broken heart. And as anyone who's ever experienced a true encounter with themselves and a real owning up to the fact that you could be doing more or you should be doing less of other things. So the experience itself of coming face to face with yourself in the mirror and saying, I could and should be doing this better. Again, bin al l'chavero, bin al l'makom. So there's a sense that my heart has already been softened. In other words, I'm a pretty good guy after all, because I feel that I'm sighing over the fact that I found myself once again, in the middle of Sim Shalom and wondering what happened, or I found myself once again, not spending as much time with my kids as I wish that I did, or I found myself once again not helping out with a friend in the community in the way that I wish that I could have or should have. I found myself once again falling asleep instead of, on the safer, instead of doing whatever I can to be able to stay awake, to be able to study late at night. And so I think to myself, I wake up with a sigh. So I'm already fixing the problem. Al tiftach b'cha. Don't be so certain. Don't be so self-assured. Rak timaher od moe li kones alibcha l'shaded es admascha hakasha. Such a beautiful Lishonos. Rather quickly, while the door is still open, while the time is still ripe, enter deeply into your heart, into the soil, which is normally so hard, which is hard to break through and to plow over. Haskein es aptzaim. Go in and fix the wounds. There's a festering wound that you, for a moment, have the ability to drain out. Hashve es akmumius. Go and straighten out all the crookedness. The hashlech misham es ataloyim. Go and cast away all of the worms. Imtze secha asher sham kanenu. Se asehem asher sham kanenu. Excuse me. Cast out the worms. Imtze asehem asher sham kanenu. Together with all the filth that these character flaws have allowed to, that you've allowed these character flaws to fester inside of you. Aval maher asaken. And here's the tie-in to what we've been talking about. Aval maher asaken. But make sure you do it quickly. Ki af im dom lecha sha'ata margish hachna shel tshuva b'kirbecha. Because even if, as you're having that experience, you feel like, I'm going to feel this way forever. I'm gonna feel this pain of the inadequacy of my service, of my divine service, of my service as a friend, as a parent, as a spouse, whatever it is. If you feel like you're gonna feel that way forever, it's not true. Vayav danefesh. That feeling of hachna, that feeling of humility, that feeling of the possibility for tshuva, that feeling of a desire to be different, it's not forever. Mikol makom yesh shekol ze rak min eza taiva asher nechser lechahi. Ima kavod she'atem mis'ave love o taiva acheres nechser lecha. It could be that the feeling that you're feeling while you want to be better is really, and that's okay if that's what it's coming from. But the opportunity, this door which is opening to change, to be different, it could be coming from some internal desire, something that you're lacking. a certain self-respect, a certain kavod that you're not getting because you feel that you're unable to command that kavod because of the way that you comport yourself. Maybe there's a particular honor that you're looking to have, the honor of being able to finish Shas. You keep falling asleep, you're never going to finish Shas. There's some other thing that you're not getting because you're just falling short of your goals. Even if you're not even aware, and it's a subconscious thing that you're lacking these things and you're not even aware that you're lacking them. You cannot be certain what's going to come the next moment. It could be that this next moment, of the nafesh, you're going to lose this neshama yisera, and neshama yisera doesn't only come on Shabbos, and neshama yisera comes anytime a person feels this mysterious feeling all of a sudden that I want to be better, this baskol that's yotze mehar chorev every single day that says, shuvu banim shovavim. But it's only for a moment. Because perhaps you'll get that self-respect a moment later, or maybe you'll get that thing a moment later, or maybe the gates will close for some other reason. Drawing from the imagery of, by Yaakov Avinu, pulling the stone off of the well so that they could feed the sheep. But then the stone goes back on the well. In the moment that the stone comes off the well, recognize any moment when a person all of a sudden feels open to the possibility of change, help us to recognize, Hashem, please help us to recognize that is not that's not something that lasts forever. Soon your heart will return to being a heart of stone like it was before. Arel v'atum mikol tzad. Thick-skinned and stuffed up from every side. Va'ata tishar milachutz, and you will be left outside of this well. The well was open for a moment, and the rock is going to go back on it, and you'll be stuck on the outside. And recognizing that that's true from the outset means that you'll be able to appreciate it when you have it. Tishtokik l'takin ma shebelibcha, go and yearn to fix that which is in your heart. In that moment, you're going to want to have access to your heart to be able to make those changes, but it'll be too late, it'll already be gone. And you'll have no opportunity to rule over your heart in that moment. So end with a Maisa. It's almost 11 o'clock. It's past 11 o'clock. We'll end with a story and we'll say goodbye to Cheshvan. There's a Maisa that the Beis Halevi spent a few months studying under Shlomo Kluger. Shlomo Kluger was a Gon Olam, whose father was Shlomo Kluger was like a miracle child. He was taking care of his blind father when he was swept up by the Dubner Magid. The Dubner Magid saw, it was a big Baal Chesed also. Dubner Magid, you don't become a Magid for nothing. The Dubner Magid saw Shlomo Kluger tending to his old father, and the Dubner Magid invited them into his house to take care of them a little bit for a few days, and he saw that Shlomo Kluger was Kluger indeed. He was quite a precocious young child. He said to the father, Chaval that your son should, not Chaval that he's taking care of you, that's very nice, but Chaval that he shouldn't be able to get an education, he's spending all day taking care of you. Why don't you guys stay with me permanently? I have plenty of space. You'll live with me, and I'll take care of you, and I'll pay for your son to go to school. You should be able to learn Torah. And shortly after, this blind gentleman passed away, and the Dubner Magid adopted and raised Reb Shlomo Kluger, and Reb Shlomo Kluger, was a Gon Olam. So the Beis Halevi went to go study by Reb Shlomo Kluger, and after a few months of studying Reb Shlomo Kluger and mamish like plumbing the depths together with him, so he came to his Rebbe, to Reb Shlomo Kluger, to take leave, and he said, Rebbe, I spent the past few months asking you every question under the sun. Kama v'kama kashyos. I asked you so many questions. He said, Rebbe, I have one kasha before I leave that I need to tell you. And I don't think you have the answer to this kasha. In fact, I know you don't have the answer to this kasha. So Shlomo Kluger looked at me and said, well, try me, why don't you... So he said, nah, Rebbe, I know you don't have the answer to this kasha because I know you have this kasha as well. So he certainly piqued Shlomo Kluger's interest. He said, no, just tell me what the kasha is. What's the kasha already? So the Beis Halevi turned to his Rebbe and he said, my kasha is, kasha alai predascha. It's hard for me to leave you. Kasha alai predascha. It's hard for me to leave you. It's going to be very difficult. And I know it's hard for me to leave you also. And you don't have an answer to that question. I don't have an answer to that question also. So I don't have an answer to that question either. It's kasha aleinu to leave Chodesh Cheshvan. It's kasha aleinu to leave things behind, to say goodbye to Sarah Imeinu, and on a certain level to say goodbye to Avram Avinu. You know, it's like comes so quick, and all of a sudden the warm embrace of being in Parshas Bereshis again, and being at the story of the Avos, and feeling this homecoming like we spoke about, and suddenly it's gone. But kasha aleinu predasenu. It's hard for us to leave. The one nechama that we have is that indeed when we leave these matters, when we leave these things, so then it's an opportunity to really acquire them more deeply. Hashem should help us that as we exit Chodesh Cheshvan and as we leave Avram and Sarah behind in the Parsha Shavua, we should be zoche to really hear these things in a proper way and to come to new levels of avodas Hashem, and to reaffirm our commitment to taking advantage of the opportunities when we have them, to take advantage of Shabbos when we recognize that vaya of the nafesh, and that merit will be zoche to truly have Neshama Yisera and to truly acquire Chodesh Cheshvan.